Welcome to Mr. Giant Reacts and Ting and Ting and Ting. I'm Mr. Giant, back with another video for you, back with another reaction. And the big question for a lot of people is Nikola Tesla. Who is he? What did he do? And most importantly, where did he come from? Let's go ahead and check out the vibe and see what is being said here. You know what I mean? This one is what DNA revealed about Nikola Tesla's ancestry. Let's check this out.
Nikola Tesla is one of the most documented inventors in history. His patents are archived. His letters are preserved. His laboratory notebooks are studied to this day. But for all that documentation, one question was never asked during his lifetime and has only recently become possible to answer. Where did the Tesla family actually come from? The answer, the DNA, is pointing to changes the story. Tesla was born in 1856 in the village of Smiljan, in what is now Croatia, then part of the Austro-Hungarian military frontier, a region that had been one of Europe's most contested and repeatedly resettled borderlands for 300 years. His father, Milutin Tesla, was a Serbian Orthodox priest, educated, disciplined, deeply embedded in the religious and cultural life of the frontier community. His mother, Duka Mandic.
Okay, really weird question here because I was raised Catholic. Are Orthodox priests allowed to get married? Because you said that Nikola Tesla was an Orthodox, his father's an Orthodox priest. I'm asking because I don't know, and the premise of this channel is to learn stuff. I was raised Catholic. Catholic priests and nuns were not allowed to get married. So please inform a brother in the comment section.
Came from a family of priests and craftspeople, and was known locally for a memory so extraordinary she could reportedly recite entire books by heart and construct household tools from scratch without ever having been formally taught. His Serbian identity was documented,
That was his mother?
lived, and never questioned. When he arrived in New York in 1884, penniless and carrying letters of introduction, he listed his nationality as Serbian. That was the fact. That was the story. The church records confirmed it. The language confirmed it. The faith confirmed it. What no one examined was how the Tesla family came to be in that region in the first place.
Oh, that's going to be interesting.
The military frontier was not organically settled territory. It was administered by the Habsburg Empire specifically as a buffer zone against Ottoman expansion to the south and east, a deliberate geopolitical construction, not a natural community. Beginning in the 16th century, the Habsburgs offered land grants, tax exemptions, and religious autonomy to displaced populations willing to settle along the frontier and serve as permanent military defenders. The offer attracted waves of communities that had been uprooted by Ottoman conquest and had nowhere stable to return to. Serbs, Croats, Vlachs, and others arrived across the 16th.
Before we go any further, it seems like that is a theme in that region. People getting uprooted from where they are because of conflict and they end up somewhere else. You know what I mean? And some go back and some stay where they are, which could lead to more conflict and stuff. But it seems like that happened a lot in that region. But I think it's because it's all landlocked. You know what I mean? Something like that wouldn't happen. We take all the Caribbean islands together and people get uprooted back and forth. That's going to be hard to do because it's a massive ocean there. Not everybody owns a boat that could go through those waters there. So
17th and 18th centuries, settling alongside one another in a region defined by constant movement, contested borders, and accelerating cultural consolidation.
Yep.
Families adopted local languages. They aligned with the dominant religious institution, Serbian Orthodoxy, and over generations, the distinctions between groups blurred and then disappeared. By the 19th century, many frontier families had no visible memory of where their ancestors had originally come from. The written record tracked faith and profession. It did not track origin. It did not ask where a family had been before the parish register first recorded their name. And it had no mechanism to capture the biological ancestry that lay beneath whatever identity a family now carried. The Habsburgs needed soldiers and settlers. They did not need genealogists. Origin was irrelevant to the administrative purpose. What mattered was presence, loyalty, and religious alignment. Everything else was allowed to fade. In 2019, genetic researchers working in collaboration with Balkan Genealogical Archives began a systematic study of Y chromosome haplogroups from historical figures with documented patrilineal descendants. The goal was to use modern genetic tools to trace the deep ancestry of families whose written records had run out. The Tesla family was included. Tesla himself had no children, but parish records identified collateral male line relatives, branches of the family that had remained in the region, whose lineage could be traced with documented confidence. 2 individuals with confirmed direct Tesla patrilineal ancestry provided samples for analysis. The process was careful and methodical. Researchers cross-referenced church registers, land records, and Habsburg administrative documents before accepting any candidate as a valid patrilineal descendant. The sample size was small, as it often is in historical genetic research of this kind, but the provenance of the individuals involved was treated as a condition of inclusion, not an afterthought. This kind of study had been conducted successfully on other European historical families, and the methodology, while not without limitations, had produced peer-reviewed results robust enough to reshape understanding of well-documented lineages. The Tesla case was approached with the same framework. The researchers understood they were working with indirect evidence. They also understood that indirect evidence, handled rigorously, can tell genuine stories. The Y chromosome profile that came back didn't.
Isn't it amazing how that could be done, though? And I'm not endorsing this by any stretch of the imagination. This is just really interesting to me. They're going to use DNA to figure that out, and that's crazy. How science have exploded to these heights. You know what I'm saying?
Not match the expected cluster. The majority of ethnic Serbian men from the military frontier zone carry haplogroups consistent with South Slavic migration patterns, populations that moved into the Western Balkans from the Carpathian region during the 6th and 7th centuries CE, part of the broader Slavic expansion across Europe in the early medieval period. That was the expected result for a Serbian Orthodox family with deep roots in the frontier. What the Tesla paternal markers showed was something different. They pointed further east and to a more recent divergence point, a profile that aligned more closely with populations associated with the Vlach diaspora, communities that had moved through the Carpathian and Danubian corridors across the medieval period and gradually resettled throughout the Balkans as Ottoman disruption reshuffled the population map of southeastern Europe. The divergence was not a borderline result. It was statistically clear enough that the researchers flagged it immediately as requiring a historical explanation rather than a methodological one. The question was no longer whether the result was anomalous. The question was what the anomaly meant, and whether the historical record contained enough evidence to answer it. The Vlachs were not a marginal group. They were one of the most widest and least understood peoples in medieval European history. Semi-nomadic in lifestyle, Latin language speaking, their tongue was a Romance language related to Romanian, descended from the Latin of Roman provincial populations in the Balkans, and Eastern Orthodox in faith. They occupied a strange middle space in the region, ethnically distinct, yet deeply integrated with the communities around them. They moved with livestock across seasonal grazing routes, traded across long distances, and maintained their own customs and social structures for centuries. Byzantine chronicles mentioned them. Medieval Serbian legal codes referenced them. Ottoman administrators recorded their movements. They were visible enough in the historical record when they wanted to be, and invisible enough when they did not. Over centuries, they became expert navigators of political and cultural change, surviving Ottoman conquest, Habsburg administration, and repeated demographic reshuffling by doing what mobile populations have always done when empires close in. They adapted, they blended, and they endured. But they were also porous to the cultures they moved through. Over time, In community after community,
Intermarriages
Vlach
and stuff.
families intermarried with their neighbors, adopted local languages, aligned with local religious institutions, and gradually stopped marking themselves as separate. The assimilation, in many cases, was complete within 2 or 3 generations. By the 18th and 19th centuries, families that had carried Vlach ancestry for hundreds of years might speak Serbian fluently, practice Serbian Orthodoxy devoutly, bear surnames that gave no indication of earlier origin, and have no conscious awareness that their patrilineal roots lay anywhere other than where they were standing.
This study is going to like really explode some debate there. Hit me up in the comment section. Discuss. Arguments, fights, and all that. Nope. Discuss. You understand? Because this is quite interesting. So what they say is that it's quite possible that they came across the Carpathians, his ancestry. So that's where it's heading. That's where it's heading there. You know what I mean? This is kind of crazy here. Now he says he's Serb, so we're gonna go with that.
They were not hiding anything. There was nothing left to hide. The memory had simply dissolved into the community around them, the way a tributary loses its name when it joins a larger river. What the Vlachs left behind was not a paper trail. It was a genetic one. The Tesla paternal haplogroup markers fit the genetic profile of populations that followed exactly this trajectory. A family that entered the military frontier zone, carrying Vlach patrilineal ancestry, integrated into Serbian Orthodox community life across several generations, adopted the Serbian language and identity fully, and by the mid-1800s had produced a priest, a man whose entire public role was the embodiment of Serbian Orthodox religious and cultural tradition. The genetic record suggested the assimilation had been so complete that nothing in the family's visible life would have hinted at any other origin. Not the name, not the faith, not the profession, not the language. The surface was Serbian in every detail. The deep past was something older and more complicated. The Tesla surname offered a quiet additional signal that researchers noted. The word Tesla, referring to an adze, a woodworking tool used to shape timber, existed in both South Slavic and Vlach Romanian vocabulary, inherited in each case from the earlier Latin linguistic layer that had been deposited across the Balkans during centuries of Roman rule. The name alone proved nothing. Occupational surnames of this type crossed cultural boundaries freely, but alongside the genetic data, it was another thread pointing in the same direction, a surname that could have originated in either community, in a region where both had coexisted and eventually merged. Individual details like this carry no weight on their own. But researchers working with historical genetic evidence routinely look for this kind of corroboration, linguistic.
You know, that's quite possible because check this out. Let's look at it this way. Somebody moved from, let's say, the islands. They come here, first generation. They have an accent. They have a culture that they came from and all of that. Then they have children in that place and the children start assimilating. If the children don't pay attention to where they come from, they're going to completely assimilate. And slowly but surely, as the years go by and the decades go by, their kids wouldn't have any trace of anything. You know what I mean? Which is kind of like what's happening with me and my son. My son is, there's nothing Caribbean about him, period. So then his kids, there's nothing Caribbean about them. And since I'm not in his life or in their life anymore, I don't have any influence over, you know, that kind of vibe. So they're going to be straight up assimilated, period. So
genealogical, geographic, because it is the accumulation of small, consistent signals, not any single piece of evidence, that builds a credible case. Each thread was thin. Together, they pointed the same way. Tesla's maternal line told a completely different story, and the contrast is striking.
Okay.
The mitochondrial DNA tracing the direct female ancestry of the Mandic line, Tesla's mother's family, showed markers consistent with the ancient Dinaric substrate of the Western Balkans. This is among the oldest detectable genetic layers in southeastern Europe, representing populations with continuous habitation in the region that predates the Slavic migrations by thousands of years. These are the genetic descendants of communities that lived in the Dinaric Alps and the surrounding areas before recorded history in the Balkans begins. Their ancestry did not arrive with a migration wave. It was already there. It had been there long before the Slavs moved south, long before the Vlachs moved west, long before the Habsburgs drew a line on a map and called it a frontier. While other populations were arriving, consolidating, and assimilating around them, the maternal ancestors of Duka Mandik were simply continuing, generation after generation, rooted in the same mountains, the same valleys, the same genetic continuity that stretched back through centuries the written record never reached. That kind of deep continuity is rare in the Balkans, a region that saw more migration layering than almost anywhere else in European history. The Mandik line appears to represent it. The contrast between the two lineages maps almost perfectly onto the contrast Tesla himself drew between his parents. His father, structured, literate, disciplined, embedded in institution and hierarchy, a man defined by the formal frameworks of language and faith. His mother, intuitive, gifted with tools and memory, seemingly operating on a different kind of intelligence, one that didn't require formal instruction and couldn't be fully explained by the education available to her. Tesla credited her explicitly in his memoirs. He said his inventive gifts came from her.
Yeah.
Whether or not that attribution is genetically meaningful, the symbolic parallel between the two lineages is difficult to ignore. Two entirely separate genetic histories, rooted in different populations, different migration arcs, and different relationships to the land, converging in a priest's household in a frontier village in the 1850s to produce one of the most unconventional minds of the modern era. One lineage in motion across centuries. One lineage standing still. Both necessary. Both present in the same man. The researchers who produced these findings are measured in their conclusions. No sample from Tesla himself exists, and without one, the connection to the Tesla patriarch rests entirely on collateral descendants. Haplogroup analysis is probabilistic by nature. The markers identify probable population affiliations, not certain ones. Distributions overlap across populations in ways that complicate clean conclusions, and the findings have not yet been published in a peer-reviewed journal. Ongoing analysis is continuing, and the scientists state these caveats clearly. They are not claiming certainty. They are presenting a statistically significant divergence from expected results, a coherent historical framework that accounts for it, and an open question that further research may eventually resolve. Independent replication, larger sample sets, and the possible discovery of additional documentary evidence from Habsburg-era migration records could all sharpen or revise the picture. Science of this kind is iterative. The current findings are a beginning, not a verdict. But they are a beginning that points somewhere real, and that is more than any biography of Tesla has previously been able to say about the origins of his patrilineal line. But the gap between the Tesla Y chromosome profile and the expected Serbian Slavic cluster is not a measurement error. It is a signal. And the historical record of Vlach assimilation into Serbian Orthodox frontier communities in exactly the region and time frame that would produce the Tesla family is not a hypothesis. It is established scholarship, documented in Habsburg military administration records, church registers, migration studies, and Balkan demographic research accumulated over decades. The evidence does not exist in isolation. Each strand of it connects to a larger pattern: genetic, linguistic, historical, and geographic, that points consistently toward the same conclusion. What it adds up to is a story more complicated and more interesting than the one in the textbooks. Tesla wasn't simply a Serbian inventor from a priest's family in rural Croatia. He may have been the endpoint of one of the most underdocumented migration arcs in European history, a pastoral people who moved across the Eastern Balkans over centuries, absorbed identities, settled into an engineered borderland, raised children who became priests and craftspeople, and eventually produced a man who pulled electricity from the sky. The simplicity of the standard biography was never a lie. It was just incomplete. It described the final layer of a much deeper stack. None of this erases his Serbian identity. Tesla was Serbian in language, faith, culture, and self-identification in every way that mattered to his lived experience and to the world he moved through. He lived as Serbian, died as Serbian, and contributed to the world as Serbian. But at the level of deep ancestry, the genetic memory that the written record never captured, his paternal line may have arrived in that world from a direction that no biography has ever described. The story did not begin where the parish records began. It began somewhere further back, in a migration that left no documents, only descendants. The immigrant inventor who gave America alternating current may himself have carried alternating signals in his DNA. And the question his genome asks is one he never had the tools to answer.
Wow, that was interesting. The cool part about it is they're not saying he's not Serbian. They're not saying this is conclusive of what the vibe is and thing like that. You know what I mean? It's just another hypothesis. Hit me up in the comment section, you know what I mean? And this is what's so interesting about the world we've lived in for millions of years. There's so much migration here and going here and going there, you know. Who knows? Who knows? Like, for instance, I'll use myself as an example, okay? From the Caribbean to Kentucky. I married a hillbilly. I don't even know what a hillbilly was. And hillbilly is not a derogative term. I call her that all the time, and you know, we call each other this all the time. So, but you know, and then I produce a son who married somebody from this region, and who's got kids from a person from this region. And depending on how they get married, sooner or later, my contribution to this, not the DNA, but my contribution to this, is just going to fade away. You know, his kids might not be as tall because he's only 6'8". I don't know how tall his wife is. You know what I mean? He's a mixed kid. You know, his mom is white, I'm black. His wife is white. His kids don't know what they look like, actually, to tell you the truth. And you see, that's what I'm saying. You know, migration creates stuff like that. If the family stays together, then you could figure out the vibe. Like in my case, there's an issue, so that we are not together. Who knows what's going to be like 5 generations from now? You know what I mean? Would he take his kids back to the roots and they learn stuff and they meet people and then they mix again, you know, and vibes like that? You understand what I'm saying? Vibes like that. So, you know, and we're talking about a modern migration here too, you know what I'm saying? Back then, people were just coming and going and coming and going and looking for a better life. And, you know, that's another thing. When everybody's complaining about it and saying this and saying that and saying the other, this stuff has been going on since the dawn of time. People have been migrated. The Native Americans migrated different parts of America, down to South America, all the way down to the Caribbean. They migrated. They're looking for food. They're looking for better conditions to live in. You know, human beings migrate. That's just the way it is. And there's going to be mixing, and there, you know what I mean? And the gene pools, you know. Do you know how many tribes have become extinct because of that? You know, it's going to be like that. You know what I mean? That's something we can't stop. We just can't stop it. And not only is people from Other places going to migrate to bigger places to get better life. People from those bigger places will migrate to other places to find a more peaceful life. It's happening now. Look at all the expats and stuff that's living all over the place. You know what I mean? You got people from America, from Canada, from all over these places moving to Serbia and marrying Serbian people and living in Serbia. So when the time comes, let's say if their kids do something great, who are they going to claim? Are they going to claim them as American or Serbian? Because it's the person who is American or Canadian or British, are they going to adapt the Serbian ways, the Serbian politics, the Serbian culture completely, or are they going to teach their children about where they came from? See the questions to ask them, we could equate it to modern times. You know what I mean? Now, if you look at the DNA comes into place, then you could say, well, this person is this or that. But is the person who they were born as dictate the DNA, or is it the culture? Because you are pretty much where you live and where you've been cultured to be. Now, the person who migrate first, he's going to be of the culture where he came from. You know what I mean? You could assimilate and stuff like that. There's the gradual assimilation to weed out the culture from where you come from takes years to do. Takes years to do. Once that the first person who migrated start being forgotten, and you will be forgotten. People are going to talk about, oh yeah, my grandpa or my great grandfather was from so, but you've forgotten because the people after a certain amount of generations going to claim that they are where they're from. That's where they grew up. That's where they were cultured. That's where they were educated. So the question lies is who you are, where your lineage come from, or where you are. Because that's like saying that African Americans are Africans, but if they go back to Africa, the only thing they have in common with the Africans is the skin color. They have been cultured totally different. And the great grandparents or great grandparents who came from Africa is a foregone memory. When we have African American inventors, we don't say that they are African inventors. We say they are American inventors because of the generations of dilution and assimilation to the culture. They are Americans. So, is your lineage who you are, or is the place where you live and cultured who you are? Isn't that interesting? You know what I mean? And like I said, I'm not endorsing anything, I'm just learning stuff. I hope you guys will learn something from this here and thing like that. Hit me up in the comment section. Tell me what you think. Some people say that the Slavs have been there. They have been there, and they're the original people there. I've had people in the comment section say that there was no migration per se or anything like that. Hit me up in the comment section and tell me what the vibe is. Hope you guys are having a great day. Let's try to keep some peace in this world, okay?